Cole Cubelic, I hope you're doing well. Welcome into the game in T-Town.
Hey, I'm great, Ryan. Thanks for having me on again. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. March Madness, are you one of those guys that sets up multiple televisions, the laptop, the iPad, and watch all these games, or you guys just does one game at a time?
I wish I could just focus on one game at a time. I'll have multiple TVs in the basement, and I'll be traveling today, so I'll miss some of the early games. But tonight I'll be camped out in front of a TV with the iPad, trying to take on as much as I can. And I think I always regret it at the end of the night or the end of the weekend, because I think back to myself, similar to like I do if I ever have a college football Saturday to watch games, kind of, which game did I really see? Which game did I really watch? And sometimes it's good, I think, to just have that individual TV and be able to dial in and focus in on an individual game. But I'll probably be trying to sneak in as much as I can.
Cole, I want to pick your brain about a couple different things, and I want to ask you, from a former player's perspective, we watched the Ivy League do it a couple of weeks ago, remove tackling for football. You have any thoughts about that as a former player?
No, I do, and I think that this is something that made headlines in a very positive way for the Ivy League that's very misconstrued.
Okay.
I think this is something that sounds great. It's something that the media is going to take and run with, something that a lot of fringe fans will look at and say, oh, isn't that nice what those guys are doing? That's fantastic. I had Dan Mullen on my show a few weeks ago, and I asked him about it. He said, well, we tackled to the ground one time in practice once the season started. And he said, I think we did it a second time in bowl practice, and we only did it one time in bowl preparation. That's what spring football is for. That's why you'll never see spring football practices on back-to-back days, because they're usually pretty physical. You're going to go Oklahoma drill, you're going to go middle drill, which is offense, defensive line, basically the front sevens on both sides, running plays only. And it's a smash-mouth drill. That's why it only lasts about 5 minutes. You'll see full-speed pass rush, O-line versus D-line. You'll see one-versus-ones in team situations. And you get that a little bit in fall camp, but that's still limited in 2 days. One, because of what the NCAA has come in and done, limiting contact in fall practice. And two, you got to protect your guys for the season. But we are, in my opinion, Ryan, we are entering in to dangerous territory in the land of competitive football, in that these guys need to be prepared for contact, and they need to be prepared to play 4 physical quarters of football. And if they're not, the injury rate's already going to go up. And I think we're already seeing the injury rate increase, not just in football, but in sports across the board. And I've spoken to multiple orthopedic surgeons about it, and they say they believe the reason for that is that sports are becoming more specialized. And not only the sports, but kids are becoming position-specific in their specific sport. So your body's not used to doing a lot of different things, whereas when I grew up and you played basketball, baseball, and then maybe you were a better football player, and that ended up becoming your specialty. I played soccer when I was a kid. A lot of friends that I went to high school with wrestled. I played basketball. I played baseball growing up. I tried other sports. Some liked it, didn't like it. I played golf and tennis. My mom was a tennis player in college, so she and I grew up playing tennis a lot together. I did a lot of different things. But a lot of these orthopedic surgeons will tell you that sports are becoming more specific for kids, and then their positions are as well. But back to football, you have to understand physically the toll that your body's going to take. If not, I'm just afraid that we're going to see the injury rate continue to increase.
Yeah, and Cole, help me understand this. When you're trying to evaluate from a coach's perspective, you want to know your best tacklers. I mean, you want to know who you can depend on a 2-minute drive if you're on the defensive side of the football, who your best guys are. How do you evaluate tackling and who your best tacklers are if you're not doing it?
Well, it's the same thing that can be said for blocking. And I've told plenty of people discussing a game of football that I can teach you every step, every hand placement drill, every fundamental. I can talk you through it. I can show you on film. We can even get out against pads. And I can remember I was a blocking Tony All-American the day I stepped on campus at Auburn. But once we started going against Shaquille Spikes and Mark Smith and Charles Dorsey, that was a different deal. Jimmy Brumbaugh, I mean, those guys put me in my place quickly. And I ended up redshirting because I physically wasn't prepared for it. I didn't play a down of offense in high school, so I wasn't really ready. But it's the same is said for blocking. I can teach you every bit of the fundamentals and the technique verbally and show them to you, but until you actually get out there and do it, you're never going to be an expert at it, and you're never truly going to learn how it operates. You need to be going full speed against guys, putting a body on a body and understanding the physical capabilities that you have as that are going to enable you to be able to block and tackle, and what your opponent's going to try to do to keep you from doing that. So until you're out there competing against other guys that are going full speed, you're never going to truly understand and never truly be able to hone your craft. And so that's why this full speed blocking and tackling to the ground, it can never truly go away. Otherwise, we're going to see more games that are scoring in the 60s and 70s in college football because guys aren't going to know how to block and tackle.
We are splitting the offensive line responsibilities here in Tuscaloosa, and I go back to this offensive line. In my opinion, I thought they were pretty solid on run blocking. They struggled at pass blocking. Some of that may be due to injuries. Brent Key added to the staff. How do you think that's going to work with two guys coaching the offensive line?
You know, I think tackles are on an island so much. It's why it's the most difficult position to play once you step up to the college game. And then I think even a step further to the NFL, it's the most difficult position to be good at. Number one, you're going against some of the best athletes in college football from a size and speed combination perspective. But number two, you're by yourself a lot. I mean, how many Alabama's got one of the most athletic, talented tight ends in the country. How many times did we see him with his hand on the ground lined up next to an offensive tackle? Maybe 5-6 snaps a game. Not very often. It's not what he does. He motions around, he flexes out, he put him in a slot, let him block on screen, try to get him matched up against the linebackers. You can get him open. It's just not the way football operates anymore. So tackles about himself a lot. So the individual coaching that Mario Cristobal would be able to focus on and give that group, especially when the tight ends are down in 7-on-7 running pass routes, I think those guys will benefit from that greatly. The reasons Cam Robinson struggled, I do think, were related to injuries. Dominic Jackson just wasn't a good pass blocker. Bottom line, it wasn't something that came natural to him. I think he was a little bit too bulky to be a tackle, didn't move laterally very well, and he struggled with it. And I think teams got an understanding that when you can get Alabama in certain situations last season, you can be able to tee off and have some success. But I think that also opened up some third down runs for Derrick Henry. I think Brent Key is an excellent addition. He is a brilliant offensive mind. You're talking about a young man who, in my opinion, was on the fast track to be a collegiate head coach. And now not only are you going to have him handling your offensive line, but it's another brilliant offensive mind for that staff, in my opinion. So I think Brent Key's capable of being a head coach. Mario Cristobal's been a successful head coach. Lane Kiffin's been a head coach, and they're working with Nick Saban, who's the best head coach in college football. So that's a lot of brain power on that side of the football for the Alabama staff. I think it was a great addition. And do I see a little bit of split as far as those five working together and their comfort level, continuity, and how they gel? Maybe at first, but again, the way that they'll still be running through technique and fundamental periods together. They're still going to be lined up next to each other when they go team period, when they go pass rush, when they go middle drill. It's not like those guys are going to be on a different side of the field than the guards and centers. I think they're just going to have more individual coaching time. So I was sort of against it when I first heard about it, but the more I think about it, the more I talk about it, I think it could end up being a real positive for the Alabama offense.
Cubelic right now inside the game. He is a college football analyst for the Alabama Media Group, ESPN. The SEC Network does a daily radio program, the Cube Show there, 6 to 10 on the WUMP in Huntsville. We're talking with Cubelic right now inside the game. And as I work back to Alabama for a couple of minutes, we have watched game managers work inside this quarterback system for several years. You go back to Greg McElroy, one of your colleagues there at the SEC Network. Just don't get us beat. We'll turn it over to our defense. When you look at the strength of this team, it's the wide receivers here in Tuscaloosa on the offensive side of the football. This quarterback battle, the way I see it's a little bit different. I think it's going to be a playmaker that's going to have to win this job. Do you see any different on the quarterback side?
I don't think it has to be a playmaker in terms of utilizing mobility. I don't think that you're going to see zone read all of a sudden become a big part of what Alabama does. They're not going to put in a flatline option play that they rely on a quarterback that has good mobility to do. But I think, like you mentioned, you're going to have some playmakers on the perimeter, playmaker at tight end who can help you stretch the field. So pushing the ball down the field with accuracy, I do think is something that will be valuable for that position on the 2016 Alabama football team. So a playmaker with their arm and maybe with their brain to understand when they have one-on-ones and understand when to take those chances. I think pushing the ball down the field vertically is something that if they can find a way to do that this year, it may be more valuable than in years past because the run game won't be as dominant, in my opinion, and you're going to be able to spread the field with more weapons. So you're going to have to find a guy that understands how to make those plays down the field with his arm, but I don't necessarily think that means right away you have to have somebody who can beat you with bootlegs and zone reads and quarterback powers, things like that.
Cole, can you make the argument? I mean, when I look at Alabama, 3 new coaches, which we've already talked about, one of those guys, you got a couple of different new ideas. Jeremy Pruitt's out of the conversation. You look at Derek Ansley, the secondary, you lose 11 players. You lose a Heisman Trophy, a quarterback, a fullback. We talked about offensive lineman Ryan Kelly. You know how important that center position is. You lose a couple of All-Americans on the defensive side of the football, some first-round guys. Can you make the argument that Alabama could also take a step back this year?
You know, as a team, I would say yes, you can make that argument. I think some of the things that you didn't mention were intangibles. Guys like Reggie Ragland, who've been around the program for a long time. I think some of the undersold players last year, Denzel DeVaul, Dylan Lee, players on the edge who knew how to set the edge, who could get to the quarterback when asked, who could play out in the perimeter in space, make tackles, intercept passes, play in coverage, do some different things outside that allowed the big guys like Ashawn Robinson and Jaron Reed to really do what they do on the interior, and Reggie Ragland to get sideline to sideline and make plays. I think those intangibles, you have to kind of look back and forth and say, who are those guys going to be this year? Who's going to step up and want to be the leaders? Who's going to be the Ashawn Robinson that sort of keeps guys in check in the huddle and in the locker room? The Reggie Raglands who are calling plays and maybe understand things that the coaches haven't signaled in because they've been there, they've done it, and they've seen it. That's always valuable. Same thing with Ryan Kelly on the other side of the football, someone who's just been through so much, seen every look in the book, understands every defense, every blitz that's going to be there, and you know you're not going to have an issue with snaps. When you have an issue with snaps, that changes everything because quarterback gets worried, he stays in too long on pass plays, doesn't get into his drop, he doesn't maybe get to a handoff, and then it comes up a little bit short, and that can cause fumbles in the backfield. So inter-quarterback exchange is where every offensive play begins. So it's huge, and you build teams from the inside and out. So with Reed and Robinson gone on the inside, Kelly gone on the inside, you mentioned Derrick Henry, somebody who did a lot of work on the inside. It's definitely a point of concern, but I think what Alabama has in their favor, Ryan, is you look across the SEC West, I think every team, maybe not LSU, but every team in the SEC West is taking huge steps backwards. And Mississippi State is losing the greatest player in program history, a big play wide receiver, a couple guys on that front seven that made plays extensively over the course of the last 2-3 years. Ole Miss, a big-time wide receiver is going to be gone. Best left tackle in college football is going to be gone. One of the better nose tackles, the guy who dominated that game in Tuscaloosa the season ago, is going to be gone. C.J. Johnson leaves that defense. Auburn obviously loses a 1,000-yard rusher in Peyton Barber, a couple linebackers in McKenzie and Frost that were able to make plays. So, and they lose both tackles. I think Arkansas is the most productive tight end in school history, a great quarterback that really grew into his own a season ago, 2,000-yard rusher. The left side of that offensive line's gone. Every team but LSU, from a personnel standpoint, seems to be taking big steps back. So I think that plays into Alabama's hands. Also, people are high on Tennessee. I know Bama has to face the Vols every year. I'm not buying Tennessee. That is a believe it when I see a team for me personally. I'll take a couple other teams in the West before I would take Tennessee. I'm just not buying what Butch Jones is selling. And I think the schedule, even though it looks like USC is going to be a formidable opponent early on, replacing Cody Kessler and company, I think Alabama can handle that team. They'll be more physical. They'll be bigger and stronger. So the schedule is not as bad as I think a lot of people look at it right away and see because the rest of the SEC is somewhat going backwards.
I want to switch gears and go to basketball here just for the final question. Somebody that I know that you respect, I respect as well. Joe Dean Jr. is sort of a basketball ambassador in the state. He's the athletic director at Birmingham Southern. He took to the Twitter account last night and said, I've been asked a lot this week, what's wrong with SEC men's basketball? We watched a move by Greg Sankey earlier this week to add an advisor to improve basketball. He said he was not pleased with the direction, needs to improve, needs to take more steps in the positive direction. Joe Dean says one answer is the media in the SEC, total football focus. We don't give basketball its due. Is it you and I's fault as members of the media in the state that Auburn and Alabama are not very good?
No, I definitely don't blame it on you and I because I think we handle our own and we do a good job with it. The bottom line is this is a state and these are towns within the state that are football dominant. And SEC football has built all of these other sports in the last decade. Through the BCS era, what SEC football was able to do, I think, is greatly responsible for the success that we're seeing in SEC softball. Some of the other teams in SEC baseball, it's the top 25 is littered with SEC teams in college baseball right now. And I think a few teams in SEC basketball are being able to improve, like a Texas A&M, LSU landing the number one recruit in the nation, not being able to get it done once they got it. But from a recruiting standpoint, look at the coaches that entered this conference the past 2 seasons. Great resumes have come into this conference, and recruiting has been better the past 2 seasons. Great recruits have come in. Bottom line is the majority of the Blue Bloods they don't lie in the SEC like they do in other parts of the country. And I think we get it twisted here a little bit that when there's a good recruit in Alabama or Georgia or Florida or Tennessee as far as basketball is concerned, we all of a sudden place them on the same level as we do an elite football recruit, and it's just not the same. Elite basketball recruits, for the most part, reside in Chicago, in New York, in New Jersey, in California, in Texas. There's not a lot of Josh Langford like there is coming out of Madison Academy, and John Petty, he'll be coming out next year in North Alabama. There just hasn't been a lot of those guys in the state of Alabama. You go back to DeMarcus Cousins out of Mobile, he would be one. But it's very few of big-time elite college basketball talent. So those guys just don't really reside down here. They play football. They play other sports. The weather's warmer. They're not stuck in a gym all year like they are in Philadelphia and Chicago and New York. So
maybe we set up satellite camps. Maybe like we take Alabama basketball on the road.
Great.
You know, like that Jim Harbaugh did to Bradenton, Florida. Like we go to Chicago and New York and set up camp.
I think it'd be wonderful. Go to the ABC camp out in Vegas.
Sure.
That Adidas puts together. Go to some of the Nike camps, the Jordan camps. Listen, I just think that we all know that football is what pays the bills here. It's not to say that we won't all get excited. I'd be really excited about this tournament if Auburn was in and had a chance to win 2-3 games. It would thrill me nothing more, but it also doesn't ruin my day that Auburn's not in it. So I think Alabama fans are very similar. I know a lot of Auburn and Alabama football fans that cheer for Duke and North Carolina and Kansas and Kentucky in basketball. I don't personally understand that, but it happens. So the traditional powers just don't reside down here in basketball. It's not the media's fault. The media does what pays the bills. Writers are going to put on their websites what gets clicks. You and I are going to talk about on the air what people want to hear about, and that's not always basketball, and more times than not, it's football.